welcome back to another episode of Tech Pro Unicorn Podcast. I am your host, Michael Grace. Today, I am joined by Kevin Kohn, who is the founder and head of brand for a company called Predictable Growth, which we're going to talk about today. I had the opportunity to meet Matt as we at RPI were exploring with his partner, Kevin. We were exploring leveraging what they do, which we're going to, again, talk about for some of the digital transformation services that RPI offers. So had some personal experience, got to see the system, got to see what Matt and Kevin have put together. And Matt has just a cool background in addition to the work that he's doing with Predictable Growth. I don't want to steal his thunder of his story, but I will a little bit. So Matt wanted at one time to be a pro baseball player, which is kind of a cool fact. And he launched a company called Different Hunger, which I also want to talk about. I want to kind of weave that in to the story here at some point, because it started for you as a side hustle and then really became your platform to talk about not only a different way to do business, but really kind of your own personal different approach to taking on life, which is very cool. So, Matt, lots to talk about. Thank you for taking the time and joining us here.
Thank you, Michael. Yeah, really excited to be here and glad, grateful for you to have me on.
Awesome. So, when did the pro baseball career go sideways?
Yeah, so going into my senior year, I got cut from my college team. So that was basically, the door was closed, and I just, I didn't feel like pursuing the dream any further than that. Going into playing indie ball, minor leagues, all that stuff. That's a tough road. So it was one door closing and another one opening. That's how I saw it.
There you go. And from that, you kind of pivoted and maybe talk about what we'll kind of do like Different Hunger blog first into Predictable Growth. So Different Hunger, right? We all have personal brands and blogs and platforms for us to talk. But you kind of started this and it became probably bigger than initially you thought.
Yeah. So like I said, baseball didn't work out my senior year. I ended up studying abroad that year, which was amazing. I studied in Sydney, Australia. I got to visit Thailand. Wow. I got to scuba dive on the Great Barrier Reef. I got to check out New Zealand, and that really opened up my eyes. And so when I came back to America and back to my senior year, when I was about to graduate, two paths, or really, there was really one path. It was like you graduate, you get a job as high paying as possible. And that was just what you did. That was what all my friends did. But I really knew that wasn't going to fulfill me for the long term. And that combined with my study abroad experience really lit a fire in me to travel and explore and, really make the most of this short life that we have. And I decided that, again, one day I would need to eventually become an entrepreneur. I would need to somehow become fully independent, generate my own source of income. And so the first step for me was starting this blog, which was Different Hunger. And that was symbolic of really just my desire for something different, something more than, what all my classmates and friends were doing at the time.
Awesome. So your path of doing things different kind of continued. If you think about Predictable Growth, which is kind of the core focus, and you guys took a different approach to how you help companies create a brand, create brand awareness, create sales funnels. All these are typical kind of traditional words that you hear in marketing speak. But you guys kind of took that and elevated it to a different level. Maybe tell us a little bit about what led to the creation of Predictable Growth and how it's a little bit different.
For sure. So So long story short, after I graduated college, I wasn't prepared to really fully dive into starting my own business. I just thought it was a little bit too much of a risk. Um, and I really was, I figured the best thing for me to do was to get a job and really get paid to learn, essentially. And so that's what I did for the next year and a half, 2 years. Um, and long story short, after a year and a half, I quit my job. I left New York City. I moved down to Medellin, Colombia. At the time, I was a freelance web designer because during the process of launching my blog that we just talked about, I figured out how to set up a WordPress website, right? So throughout that time, while I was also working full time on the side, I would build WordPress websites. And, I got a few clients here and there. I made a few extra $100, $1,000 a month. And so when I quit, that was what I did full time. And another long story short, but after about a year and a half, 2 years, I was able to grow based on referrals and build out a team of overseas designers and developers, which allowed me to scale and grow and increase my revenue. And a few weeks after, basically, we had our best month of company history. And then a few weeks later, two of our biggest clients, which were about half of our revenue, ran out of budget, and the company basically came toppling down overnight. And so I had to lay off my whole team, and that was super difficult, right? Like I was just this kid with big dreams, and like it was like boom, that was like really tough. I actually had to move home with my parents because I couldn't pay rent, and like it was crazy. And so that, long story short, again, that was the genesis of predictable growth. Looking back, because I was just this creative, visionary type young, hungry dude. And I didn't know the first thing about sales, marketing, business development, client acquisition. And because of that, and because I didn't have those, things in place, the business kind of imploded. And so since that happened, I was super depressed. Like it was really tough. Right. And so for months I was just like, hating my life and just kind of struggling at home with my mom, and mom and dad, and just like whatever. And so I ended up having some conversations. I found out that like basically all of my successful friends had also had a very similar experience at least once or twice or three times. But nobody talks about it on social media, as
Sure.
I'm sure we're aware. And so that gave me hope, right? And so that's another reason, another big thing that I'm passionate about is sharing the struggle, because I think that's the one thing that everybody can relate to. We can't all relate to, being Forbes 30 under 30 or like whatever, but we can relate to the struggle, right? And so, anyways, I basically committed the next 1, 2, 3 years of my life to learning and mastering client acquisition, sales, marketing, branding, all of the things that I really didn't know the first thing about. And after a bit of time, after many hundreds of thousands of dollars invested in education and training and consulting and all that, things started working, right? And so while this was all going on, I was sharing the journey, documenting the journey, being as transparent as possible with my community. And they started asking me, Matt, can you help me? How are you doing this? Right. And so that was basically the start of predictable growth. But at the time, that wasn't what it was called. We launched basically a consulting program for agency owners. And that led into basically a lead generation and growth agency service. And now, many iterations later, predictable growth. So that's a bit of the origin story and backstory about how we got started.
Cool. And When we were looking at predictable growth, there was a couple things that we really liked. One was um, really around um, it was around the tool, but it was also just as much around the process, right? We were interested in the work that kind of we would have to do on our end in partnership to bring something forward and have it well thought out, kind of each step of it versus like, oh, we provide digital transformation services and companies should buy us.
Right.
There was a lot more to it than that. How did you guys go about like really thinking through all the steps in the process?
Yeah, so that is the result of just years of iteration, I think, and like many failures. Because again, I was basically starting from zero. But yeah, basically, it was just a lot of execution and failure, and iteration. And, you know, partly a big part of that was doing the consulting, which we
Mm-hmm.
initially launched, and really we were helping people with like one or two or three clients, like basically solo consultants and freelancers transition to companies and agencies that could have teams and staff full projects, and really, instead of charging like $500, charge 5,000 and 50,000 and beyond. So that was like our first kind of market testing, and then later on doing the actual services for not exactly those companies, but companies that were a bit further along. They already had a lot more infrastructure, but they're really just looking for more growth. We also found that those companies, there were really two core problems. One was, we would run our system and we would generate leads, we would generate appointments. However, the clients just didn't have a great offer, and the offer didn't sell, right? So like they're investing in us to bring them opportunities, but they're not getting a return because their offer slash sales process is garbage, quite frankly, right? And then the other big problem that we saw was, let's say they had a great offer. Like for example, one of our clients was a advertising agency. You know, they started with us and got clients very quickly, and then they had to stop working with us because they couldn't handle the capacity, right? They're maxed out. And so then we realized that there was a whole nother problem on the implementation side of things, right? And so the process that we have in place today is the result of, again, experiencing a lot of these challenges with companies everywhere from, going from 0 to 1 and then going from 1 to 100, right? And so we really wanted to provide a holistic solution, because we realized that that's what these companies really, really needed.
To me, that was the differentiator when we looked out there. There was a lot of folks that would bring people to us, right? Which is, yeah, okay. Let's admit that's
Yeah.
you can have the greatest offering in the world that can totally scale, but if you have no customers, does it really matter? Um, but oftentimes that failure on the back end is a bigger problem, right? We built an automation for a shipping company, and they said, "Oh, we bid on these. They're called like partial hauls, right? They're a trucking company, and if they have room in their truck, sometimes you bid on like, oh, I don't need a full truck, I just need a quarter of a trailer." And they're like, "Oh, I have a quarter of a trailer, but so do 20 other companies, right?" And you're bidding to see, you know. So we built some artificial intelligence and some AI around that, and we deployed it, and we started winning all this work, right, for this company. So our aspect of building the solution for them brought them all the work, and they called us like days later, and they're like, "Oh my God, we got to turn this off because we can't possibly scale." Based on all the work that we're winning. I mean, the tool is doing everything we asked it to. It's amazing, but we can't scale, right? Because we only thought and we only helped them with one part of the problem, right? We only helped them with the bring us more customers or bring us more business. What I really liked and what I think is kind of the cool partnership here is you guys help us think through the other side of the coin, right? Like, okay, let's do this. And for companies, like it wasn't like, okay, we're going to turn this on in a week, right? It was like, okay, here's what we do. And there was a process, not only in what we had to do and what predictable growth would do, but a timeline that was elongated to make sure, right, that we weren't um, realizing a lot of these problems, right? It wasn't the slinky effect like, oh, we did an ad campaign. Oh, shit, here comes all these customers.
Yeah.
Okay, the customers have gone away. Okay, another ad campaign. Oh,
Right.
shit, here comes the customers. And you're in this slinky nonsense because you just don't have like a plan, right? I think what we really liked was, kind of the due diligence that was done on both sides that you pointed to.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
awesome.
Yeah, yeah, and a lot of companies just like they think that more revenue and more revenue ultimately, but before that, like more appointments, more leads, that's just going to solve all their problems, right? But as you just said, that's not at all the case. And it's really important that these companies are clearly differentiated in the marketplace because, as there's so many new providers popping up every single day, and that's great news and bad news. But if you can clearly differentiate yourself, that's great news. But if you just copy the competition, which is what 95% of everybody does, then you're just fighting for scraps.
I love it. You mentioned just a brief kind of customer success story. Maybe you guys have quite a few customers that you're helping, and they're all in growth cycles. Maybe if you could share just a success story around one of your customers that you guys helped to grow.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we have, like I said, we have experience helping people kind of go from 0 to 1. Some of those biggest success stories would be one of my buddies, John Maxim. We both quit our jobs within a few weeks of each other back in 2016, and so he quit. He was a marketing director at Comcast, so he left behind a six-figure salary, and he was just a genius marketer. And so he was selling his services as basically a freelancer consultant, and he was maxing out at like 4 or 5K a month, right? And so, we really helped him redefine his positioning, build out his systems, his infrastructure to scale. And his company was just recently named Inc. 28, so that one of the 28th fastest growing companies in the entire USA. And they've closed $500,000 plus monthly deals at this stage. So that's just a crazy success story because again, we were literally just started from zero, and now he's one of the top agencies in the world. So that's one. That's John. Another one, which was also getting started, was, and I like sharing this one just because I like to really challenge people's mindsets. But this guy was a 19-year-old college dropout named Leo, and he was just at home with his parents doing a bit of drugs and alcohol and just not really finding his way. But he realized that he needed to actually make something happen. So he actually joined our coaching program back in the day. And recently he won a 2 Comma Club award from ClickFunnels for generating multiple 7 figures through his sales funnel. And so he has a growth consultancy mostly around Instagram, and growth on that platform. So 20-year-old kid, no college education, just absolutely crushing it and winning $10,000 to $15,000 monthly
Mm.
retainers, which is just I love to talk about it because it's, again, a lot of people are like, oh, well, I have 32 years experience and da 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 da, but it's like market doesn't care. The market just wants results, right? So yeah, those are a few like early stage, which I think are the most exciting. They're also the hardest and the longest. But on the
Hmm.
existing and companies that we've helped, like one of our clients was a financial services company, and within a few weeks of starting with us, they signed up a 100K deal to a brand new cold audience. So that was really cool because they hadn't really done that before. So that's more of like the established companies, which is a bit easier, obviously, because there's a lot less legwork initially required to kind of see that traction. So yeah, those are just a few success stories so far.
Awesome. It sounds like whether folks are coming to market with a service like a financial service or an agency service, or a product, right? That thought process, the predictable growth model, is applicable across both products and services.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really it's a client acquisition system that can be plugged into a variety of businesses and industries. We personally like to specialize in that B2B digital services space, just because we're not like we were talking a few months ago with like a almost $100 million a year logistics and shipping company, and I'm just like, I don't like it. Just we kind of want to stay in our lane, which again is like the digital services, because you don't like, for example, a shipping and logistics company. There were a lot of other variables, like the
Right.
cost of shipping and the logistics, and it's just like, forget all that. Like that's just going to add complexity. Whereas we really want to stay focused on the digital services, where it's like you can do it almost anywhere. A lot of our clients. Sorry, that's Oreo saying hi.
It's awesome.
Yeah, but a lot of our clients are fully remote, which is interesting, and I kind of like that as like a niche, because it's just very flexible and it's very
Sure.
quick and rapid to usually see results.
I love it. You mentioned B2B. For our customers, in business, they're used to probably that business to business relationship. How does B2B kind of sales or new client acquisition differ than say a B2C or business to consumer kind of model?
Yeah, yeah. So I think it varies quite a bit, because typically there's much higher tickets, and so that's going to require more involved sales processes, right? Whereas like an e-commerce, a D2C, you can just kind of pump ads and sell through a website. Um, you know, the B2B sales process, these are more sophisticated buyers. There's usually a few more decision makers involved, and so you really just want to have everything that you need in place um, to support that sort of buying decision, right? Because like D2C, I think, is a much more transactional, come in and go type engagement, whereas the B2B is typically, you want to get somebody in, maybe it's a few $1,000s up to $10,000 to $50,000, and then you want to not only get them great results there, but you also want to ascend them into higher tickets beyond that. So that's typically like the lifetime value, I think, is what one of the main differentiators between the two.
I love it. Now, you guys, right, as you guys are growing and continuing in the market space, um, you talked a little bit about the shipping and transportation, and you guys were like, probably not a great fit for us. You guys don't just take every client that comes in the door, waving a checkbook. Because I know for us, it was like, hey, we're only doing this number. We're only doing Talk maybe about why that is. Why do you guys kind of filter and limit versus just be like, yes, we've got
Yeah.
our own sales funnel. We're taking everything.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so maybe you can see some gray hairs here. But that is, that's what happens when you just take on anybody. Because, you know, it can be madness, right? Because it's one thing to sell something, it's another thing to fulfill it, right? And so, we definitely at one point in my journey, that definitely was the approach. It's just like, look, let's just sign up as many people as humanly possible. But on the back end of that, there's just all types of disaster and doom and stress and anxiety and you know basically everything that I wanted to avoid, and why I started my company, right? I wanted peace of mind, I wanted freedom, I wanted, impact. I didn't want to have to deal with like refund requests, and I didn't want to have to deal with, never ending Slack messages and emails, right? And so when you open up the floodgates and you don't qualify people based on the specific type of problems that they have and the specific types of companies that they are, then you open up your business and your mind and your well-being to a lot of potential problems, like I just shared, right? Because it's like, you know, somebody who is just starting their business and like literally has never gotten a client, for example, and then somebody like you, Michael, who you guys are doing great things and you have hundreds of employees and you're doing great revenues. You guys have very different problems, right? So what that means is those two clients have different problems, which means that my process is going to have to change to accommodate those. And so if every new client means that I'm changing my process, then you can never streamline or automate or simplify or do any of that, right? It's like, it's just a constant hamster wheel, right? And so that's why we really have, very specific qualifications for our different levels of engagement, because it's like, look, I don't want to devote my team's precious time and resources to somebody who's just getting started, who doesn't have any sort of traction or any offer. Somebody like that is better for our coaching and like do it yourself through software, right? Because it's just going to take too long, and like my team needs to be focused on the highest return in terms of who we take on. So that's just a little bit of a backstory about why we have those qualifications in place.
I love it. Yeah. For sure, it made us kind of really think about, um, like, oh, like we all, we had to qualify ourselves to you guys as well as, making sure that predictable growth is a good fit for us. When we think about, right, being a digital transformation company or a company with a digital transformation offering and wanting to build sales, oftentimes the answer is hire salespeople, right?
Yes.
And you're like, I need to hire salespeople. I need to build collateral. I need to
Yeah.
add headcount. I need to do all this swirl of stuff, right? Which very quickly gets expensive. I mean, easily in the hundreds of thousands, and then you're paying out all these commissions and reducing the profitability of all your deals. Um, you guys are kind of an option to that.
Yeah.
And maybe talk about just that contrast of, the traditional way of just hiring a bunch of people to go knock on doors and do all this cold selling, and the more modern way of presenting the service digitally.
Yeah, absolutely. And like in the same way that, I think it's like conventional wisdom that, you go to school, you get a job, you get a wife, you have kids, you get the house, and like you're happy. And like that's just conventional wisdom. Well, I think we are very clear that that's not always the case. And, like sky high mental health issues are proof of that. And so I always want to be wary of conventional wisdom just as kind of a blanket in every element of life and business. And that same approach applies to client acquisition and B2B sales and growth, right? And so we saw that and we're like, look, like you're going to, and I have some data on this I can share, but if you're going to hire a BDR or an SDR in the USA, even an entry level person, first of all, you're taking a risk that you're banking on the fact that they're going to come in and get results right out of the gate, right? But the reality is it typically takes about 11 months to get an ROI, including onboarding, hiring, recruiting, et cetera, right? And so you're paying out of pocket about at least $5,000 a month for that entry level person, right? And then if you go and instead hire like a sales executive, somebody that has many more years experience, you're paying at least double that, right? And so that person still needs to be ramped up, trained, onboarded, et cetera. And so if you don't have a clearly differentiated offer, you don't have a clearly defined process, then it doesn't matter how great your hires are, because they're going to come in and you're going to be leaving money on the table, right? And so we saw this happen time and time again, because we would see how, software is easily one of the most booming, sub or categories in business in B2B, right? And so the default for software is boom, let's just hire SDRs. Let's just hire SDRs and let's just dump money into SDRs. But again, it's like, you're going to be spending at least 6 to 12 months before you ever get a dime back, right? And so for me, in my own company, I saw that and I was like, that doesn't make any sense, right? Like I don't want to wait 6 to 12 months, because look, we've bootstrapped since day one, and like I'm always looking for the quickest, shortest timeline and expenditure to a return, right? And so we saw this and we're like, all right, we need to figure out a better alternative here. And so that's really what inspired what we're doing now.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean, I think when we looked at it, we were kind of like, hey, we can't really talk about being a digital transformation company and then going about it with like old school 1950s approaches, right?
Yeah.
Like we're going to a tech conference here in 2 weeks. We're going to the HIMSS conference. So a little plug, RPI will be there. I'll be there.
Hey.
If you're interested in getting some meetings, I'm happy to meet with folks while at HIMSS. But we were talking about business cards, right? And I was like, hey, we're a digitally transforming company. I am not handing out paper business cards, right? So I have a really cool, cute card that you just tap and go, and everybody can get my contact information, get to our services. And it's just that rethinking of the status quo, right?
Yeah.
And finding partners that have that progressive approach, right? We're in a different world than we were in 20 years ago, even 10 years ago. And you need to find the right partner that can get you there. So if folks want to find out more about predictable growth and the work that you guys are doing, where do they go?
Yeah, so predictablegrowth.io is our website. And for your viewers, I'll put together, by the time this goes live, we'll have a nice little landing page for all your viewers where you guys can get access to some free downloads and resources to actually help you with your client acquisition. So that's a gift from our team to yours, to your audience, Michael. And so you can go to our website and kind of get an overview of what we do. And then again, we'll have access for some free downloads and resources for you guys. And if anybody wants to book a call, you'll be able to do that as well. So yeah.
Awesome. I appreciate that offer, Matt. Thank you.
My pleasure.
It's unfortunate we didn't have Kevin on, but that gives us an opportunity to have Kevin separately as a guest and he can talk about his view. So Kevin, this mysterious Kevin, who we keep referring to, was going to join us. We were going to have the first Tech Pro Unicorn podcast with more than one guest, which I was
Trio.
super excited about. Sharing some behind the scenes stuff. We did try it a couple weeks ago, and the Zencaster technology, coupled with the bandwidth problems of Cox Internet here in the building, and a swirl of just tech mojo nonsense, got us about 10 minutes in, and then it all just literally imploded. And Kevin wasn't able to join us. So we'll bring Kevin back. He is the head of growth at Predictable Marketing, and at Predictable Growth. And you guys will, get an opportunity to talk to Kevin. But Matt, thank you for sharing your story. Personally, I'm glad you're not some highfalutin professional baseball player, that's unattainable and unreachable. And you're helping businesses grow with a really cool system. For those of you that are just listening, these are some cool people. These are people you wanna work with. They're very down to earth and very approachable and very easy to talk to. It's not come sit in the boardroom in suits, and they're gonna have these card stock things up there talking about your marketing program in front of you. They roll up their sleeves and they jump right in with you, and they have a really cool system that we've gotten to see, and it's very, very cool. So Kevin, thanks. Matt, thank you for all that you do, and for being a guest on the podcast and sharing everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Michael, for having me on. Thanks for the kind words. And I'm glad, I've experienced the opposite of what you just shared. So I'm glad that we're keeping it informal and relatable, down to earth, versus just the other potentials. So thank you.
The other side is no fun.
Yeah,
awesome.
Look, you got some unicorn stuffed animals behind you. Like that's what we're talking about. Just keeping it chill.
There we go. It's all about the casual.
Yeah.